You can't be a macho, scary dude if you're singing. You know what I mean? So
yeah. The spring rain is falling onto your grave.
They say luck occurs when preparation meets opportunity, and I was trying to prepare myself for a better life, and then I met the opporTUNEity program, and it's been one of the greatest experiences of my life, hands down.
Welcome to inTUNE, stories of connection through music. This is the podcast where we explore stories from educators, artists, and community leaders who are using music to break down barriers and build community. We'll look at how inclusion shows up in private studios, classrooms, in community programs, and even inside correctional facilities. And I'll share a few stories and strategies that might just shift the way you think about teaching and connection through music. Whether you're a teacher, a musician, a parent, or someone who simply believes in the power of music to bring people together, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Dr. Melissa Martiros, a music educator, consultant, and the founder of opporTUNEity, an organization that uses music to connect people across backgrounds, bridge divides, and open doors. My guest today is John Wayne Cormier Jr. John Wayne and I met in 2019 when we launched our first program inside the Worcester County House of Correction. He was in the very first cohort. What you're about to hear is a story of how a kid from central Massachusetts went from a rough household and a gang affiliation at 12 to being committed to the state at 13 to being voted captain of his high school football team in what looked like a real turnaround, and then losing all of that almost overnight through no fault of his own. What followed was about 15 years of homelessness and addiction, incarceration, and then a slow climb back. John Wayne has been sober since January of 2019. He's also, in his own words, proof of an old saying that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. This is an honest conversation. He gets emotional, so did I. Stay with it. Okay, so John Wayne, let's start with who you are and a little bit about yourself.
My name is John Wayne Cormier Jr. I'm from central Massachusetts. Grew up with a pretty rough family. That's the easiest way to say it. It was a construction family, very conservative, very repressive in a lot of different ways. The dynamics weren't really there, and it kind of fell apart over the years. There was a lot of alcohol and drug use, and that was kind of normalized in my household. So I took to it pretty naturally. Got to the point where I was utterly homeless and helpless and just trudging the streets with people who loved me, kind of keep me at arm's length because I was a total liability to be around. There was what they call in recovery a gift of desperation. I was so sick from heroin and fentanyl use that I felt the need to rob a convenience store. They had arrested me and brought me into custody, and it was one of the best things that had ever happened to me, but at the time it was a very miserable experience. Nowadays, they will detox you with medication. Back then, it was just cold turkey, and that's what I had to go through. So it was something I'll never forget. Very sick, very miserable, but started to clear up in the jail, and I had applied for the STOP program. They actually denied it a few times because I had gang affiliation.
For listeners who may not be familiar, the STOP program, Substance Treatment Opportunity Program, STOP, is a voluntary rehabilitation initiative managed by the Worcester County Sheriff's Office.
One of the COs and I were having a conversation, which was new because I never really even respected them or talked to them. But he had asked me why hadn't I gone up to the STOP program, and I told him I applied 3 or 4 times and they won't take me. And we were talking about a mutual friend who had just recently overdosed and died, and he's like, "I think you should probably get some treatment." And then we were talking about STOP. But anyway, he went and made the phone call. He went out of his way to help, and he came back down and he was like, "Pack your stuff, and you're going to go up to the STOP program." So that was somebody from the community who didn't have to go out of his way to help, but decided he could make the call, and he got me up there. And that's where the beginning for me really started to change, because then I had a lot of respect for the COs, and I got to the program and started to work my recovery. I was very polarized at first, struggling with the whole gang persona, and I was trying to have one foot in each doorway kind of deal. And I heard Derek Kaiser, he's from Fresh Start. He was a former original Kilby Street gang member, and he's a mental health counselor now, and he does a lot for the community. He came to the jail and he shared his story and talked about how he became successful, and I'm getting goosebumps. It inspired me. It showed me that I can walk away from that lifestyle and commit myself to doing better. And so I had made that decision, and it was right around that same time they were talking about a music program. I've always been interested in music. I've sang, I was in choir, and just always interested in music itself. A little bit of rap, a little bit of acoustic singing and whatnot. And I had signed up for the class, and I'll never forget it. Walking into that room and seeing you guys, it was my people, musicians. I've started to identify who I actually am. And that was really big. When you're active, you kind of lose who you are. So discovering who you are in sobriety is really cool. And that's a really short version of the whole story. They say luck occurs when preparation meets opportunity. And I was trying to prepare myself for a better life. And then I met the opporTUNEity program. And it's been one of the greatest experiences of my life, hands down.
Could you talk a little bit more about how that experience in the STOP program was different from what your experience was in the main jail?
Oh, absolutely. Sure. So in the main jail, the mods are like general population. It's where the regular everyday inmates are housed, but it's also where the problems exist there, because if you get tickets or you get in trouble while you're in jail, you never get to go to a higher classification, which is where you get to work, keep yourself busy. And there's other programs. And so STOP was one of the programs that you could sign up for, but you had to behave. You had to stay out of trouble. And it was complicated for a known gang member who was like kind of up there in the ranks to stay out of trouble and stay out of the politics and whatnot and not get a write-up. There's a remarkable difference because we're separated from the other inmates. There was a big difference between the atmosphere, and being there, you felt more like a person. The staff seemed to treat you more like a person, whereas like you're down in the mods, you're just like another number kind of floating around waiting for something terrible to happen, because it usually does. It was a major relief to get up to the STOP program. I had heard about it before, but I never gained access to any higher classification because I was always getting in trouble. So staying out of trouble was paramount. And I had known when I got arrested that it was time. It was time to like stop, get my life back together. So I had subconsciously made a commitment to that, and I was able to stick to it, and things have been much better. Like I got to remind myself how much better it is sometimes, because I am some human, and I want to complain here and there, but life is good now. If it wasn't for, there's just so many key players, like the guy the CO who made the phone call, and then the clinicians in the program and the music program, just people who, whether they knew it or not, large components of the process.
When you're in the STOP program, which is now in the annex, they're not in cell blocks. They're free to roam. They have programs all day. There's just a lot more freedom.
You mentioned something that's really important, and that's about the distinction between being locked down, like locked in your cell. So in the main jail, you're locked down 22, 23 hours a day, every day. So you're in your cell for the majority of the day. You get out for like a 30-minute rec period, and when you get out, you have limited time to do what you got to do, get on the phone or get your canteen or take a shower or play cards or call your loved one or whatever. And as far as like tickets go, or if you're a gang member, you can get written up just by congregating. So like if I had two or more of my guys in the same cell, we would all get written up. So when I tell you that it was hard to like navigate, life in the mods without getting written up, I mean, it's almost a miracle that I was able to not get written up. There's minor infractions like that, but they get to like major infractions where there's like the law gets involved again and you have to go back to court. People think that like the crime stops when you go to jail, and it's actually expedited. Like there's a lot more crime that takes place in jail than on the street from my experience. So
why do you think that is?
I would say just anger, baseline rage. There's so many people who are just marginalized and dismissed, and so they're already not looked at like humans. They do a crime, who knows what it is. This is county jail, so some of these aren't really serious issues is what I'm trying to say. If you're in jail for a month, you had a job in an apartment, like that's all you need to lose everything. So if you're in custody, like people are just already upset. There's a lot of rivalry, there's a lot of ego, there's a lot of machoism. There's like that whole persona that you have to put on. And that's why I think the music program was so amazing, because it works to break down that barrier. You have to take the mask off to perform, in my opinion. It's authentic. You can't be a macho, scary dude if you're singing. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I do want to dive into the music program. But before I do that, I want to kind of take a step back, right? So you mentioned that your childhood was rough and you got into drugs. How old were you? What did that look like?
The first technical drug that I remember consuming was nicotine. I was in second grade, stealing cigarettes from my father. I remember riding my bike and to go like as far away as I could and with a buddy or something, and we would light up some cigarettes. And I remember smoking cigarettes and getting lightheaded and enjoying that feeling. I was really young. The acceptance in my household, when I was 12 or 13, my father gave me permission to smoke marijuana, drink alcohol, and cigarettes. I just wasn't allowed to do it anywhere else. I had to be at home. So then my house became like the spot where the other guys from school wanted to come over and hang out because like we were allowed to drink and smoke. And most families would sit down and say grace before they have dinner. We would sit down and light a joint. And that was kind of the atmosphere in my household. So also there was a lot of behavioral issues at a young age. There's also really good test scores. Like I was a great student, but I was just acting out. I had a very aggressive and angry and abusive father at home. My mother wasn't in the picture. She was kind of pushed out of the picture. So there was no feminine presence at all to kind of nurture. And I threw temper tantrums and it was very aggressive and very violent. And so at 13 years old, I was arrested at Millbury Junior High School for possession with intent to distribute. And I was committed to the state at 13 and went to my first program.
What were you in possession of?
It was Ritalin. To me, it's very fascinating. Like I look at 13-year-olds today and I'm thinking to myself, that's how old I was when I was sniffing drugs. How does a 13-year-old even know how to do that? You learn from what you're around. And that was just the atmosphere in my home. And so I had a couple of buddies that had probably the same dynamics at home. And one of them brought in a bunch of Ritalin for his birthday and we were crushing them in the bathroom and sniffing them. And somebody had let the authorities know. Like they came and it was a police detective and my parents were there and it was just a big...
Did you intend to distribute?
We weren't going to sell it, but we were definitely like giving them out. We were giving them out to like other students. Like, yeah, I have a couple, you know, like, so that's a problem. And also this was like shortly after Columbine. It was maybe like a year before, not even like it was pretty fresh. And I had a knife, I had a bandana. So they called it a gang bandana, which it actually was. I was affiliated.
Did they know that?
Yeah, they knew. Okay. I didn't hide it.
Do you think you had like a certain reputation and then you were found with the Ritalin? So it was just like, bingo, we've got John Wayne. We're putting him into custody.
I definitely, yeah.
When were you in the gang? When did you join the gang?
I had just gotten to Millbury, so I was like 12 or 13 years old. It was just a local kind of crip set, believe it or not. These couple of guys were like, I don't know, in their early 20s that were looking for the younger guys to go out and do all the, you know, because they would gas us up. They'd be like, you'll move up and like you'll make all kinds of money and we'll take care of you and I'm your boy and all this and that. I'm gullible. I still am.
How did they find you?
I found them. I always found the trouble because I was looking for stimulus. I was constantly seeking stimulation one way or another because that's what it was like in my household. You're always on the edge. And so like when I went out into the world, it felt off until I created chaos and then I would feel more normal. But I remember getting jumped in. There was like 6 guys for 6 minutes.
They just like beat you up?
You're not allowed to punch in the head, but yeah, you just got to take it.
For as long as I've known you to be a purely authentic musician. Kind of following this trajectory to age 12 that led you into gang stimulus. You were kind of acting out stuff from home. Where was music in that trajectory? Did you have guitar? Did you have singing music as an outlet? You know, during those formative years, what did that look like for you?
Thank you for the comp. That's a major compliment. It's one that I've heard a few times as far as like it being like a part of who I am and that I should lean into it. I've been hearing that. I got emotional when you said that because I've been hearing that a lot lately. The first introduction to music, I was in 5th grade and my sister and her friend, they were going to do the talent show. And they wanted to do Mariah Carey and Jay-Z's Heartbreaker. Do you remember that song?
I do remember that one. Yep.
They wanted me to rap Jay-Z's verse. They didn't even ask me. They told me, Johnny, you're going to rap Jay-Z's verse at the talent show. I was like, okay. I mean, it was a junior high talent show, so we weren't even sure if I was allowed to do it. At this point in my life, this is when I lived in North Brookfield. We were still kind of at my grandparents' house who were going through a divorce. Family was it was still there, but it was kind of crumbling. So at that point in my life, there wasn't much behavioral issues or anything like that. And I was a really good student. So anyhow, I went to the talent show and I did Jay-Z's verse and stole the show. Like the crowd was like, they lost it. The oldest thing that I can remember that I think relates to music in a foreign way is I did impressions when I was really young. I used to do like impressions of like comedians and stuff. Jim Carrey was one of the primary ones I'm thinking of. Adam Sandler, these guys, like I would do like impressions and that was like an act kind of thing. And if you look at pictures of me when I was a little guy, like up to 5 or 6 or 7 years old, I would always pose. So if you took a picture of me, I wouldn't just like smile. I would like.
Were you like a kind of class clown a little bit?
Oh yeah. I've always been the person who can't hide in the crowd. I've always kind of stuck out in a way, but yeah, no experience with music. I do have music in my family. They were a major bluegrass band. My grandfather's father on my mother's side was one of the primary members of the Sons of the Pioneers. So there's music in my blood, you know, but like it wasn't to my knowledge. And like I said, my mother wasn't around. We had just gotten back from Canada too. So that was another part of my story that was kind of a change because we went from Worcester, I was in 2nd grade, and then we went up to Canada and lived in a totally different country. on a native reservation, which they treat the natives like the marginalized here. They're not treated like humans. It's terrible. And I lived with them. So the French kids didn't like me because I lived with the natives, and the natives didn't like me because I'm white and I'm French. So I got bullied a lot, like picked on hard. That was where like the attitude started to develop, I think, because before that I wasn't combative or aggressive in any way, but that was where I think I picked that up. And then we came back to North Brookfield and we did that talent show. And shortly after that, like 99, 2000 is when we moved to Millbury.
Okay, so you came back to North Brookfield, you did the talent show, you rapped, you realized that you love to be on stage maybe as a performer, all that stuff.
So actually I was approached, I forget her name, but she was an executive at Longview Recording Studio. And she had the Cool Kids Choir. So she approached me afterwards and she was like, that was incredible. She was like, she's asking the same kind of questions that you're asking, like, any experience with this before? Have you ever done this before? Have you ever been on stage? And I was like, no. It's like, it's the first time. I've never done anything like that. She's like, wow. She's like, listen, kid, you're really young and you might not understand it just yet, but she's like, you got it. You got it. And like, whenever you really like iron that out and figure it out, you should probably look me up.
What did you do with that? Like, how did that shape you internally with that kind of a compliment?
Internally, that is definitely like the cornerstone of my confidence. I've always had this feeling that I was going to be famous, a huge story, like a major success. I didn't really have an idea as to like how or why, but when that woman approached me and told me that, I ate it up, and she wanted me to join the Cool Kids Choir. And so I did. And I got into a part of that, but we moved around so much that there was never a chance to stabilize. So right as I got interested in the Cool Kids Choir, we were ripped away and we moved to Millbury, and in Millbury is where that's where the drugs and the gangs and the violence and stuff really, really, really took off. So
it almost seems to me like if you had stayed in North Brookfield, you were on a path to feel like you belonged and had an outlet, and maybe your whole trajectory would have been a little bit different. I mean, tell me if I'm projecting into this a little bit too much, but what I know about music programs and choirs is that you form a sense of family and community, and your talents were seen and probably affirmed, and you probably had a friendship and you had a sense of belonging maybe in a way that you hadn't before. And then you were pulled from that. You were brought into Millbury, and like your first attempt at sort of creating a community was to join a gang, and then it just kind of went downhill from there.
I never thought of it from that perspective, but that's actually, thank you for that, because there's probably a lot of truth to that, especially because my family was well off. They were like upper blue collar, like almost white collar. My grandfather was a hard worker. He had a very successful construction company. So my father and his brothers were all very, very spoiled growing up. Mm-hmm. They had everything they ever needed. Their parents were always there for them. The oldest of the 5 brothers passed away in 1985 on a freak motorcycle accident. And that's what drove the spike between my grandparents, and eventually created a cataclysm where the family split apart. So I think that all has to play into this idea of like finding family, because we had a major family when I was like up to 3 or 4 years old. Every Christmas was like the sitting room was just filled with presents for 3 grandkids, and it was filled. We were spoiled rotten, and we had family. We had holidays. We did all the things, and so that rapidly deteriorated and left me with a father who, he was really young, in his defense, and he had a taste for alcohol and drugs, and he tried to do the best he could. I'm still working to reconcile that. That's probably going to be a lifelong thing, but thank you for that.
Okay, so you went to Millbury, and then you joined the gang, and then I assume music was sort of cut out of your life for a little while in terms of like performing, and then you got busted for having Ritalin, intent to distribute. Then what happened? Did you do time?
13 years old. They pulled me out of the house. I went to lockup. I met a lot of people a lot like me, and I went to a drug program. You can get on probation as a juvenile, but then you can get committed to the state as a juvenile.
Where did you do time? Were you like at Leahy or?
Yes. Well, okay. It was formerly the Worcester Gym, and then it became the Leahy Center. I was there when it was the Worcester Gym, and that was just like a transitional spot. So I went there for a couple of days, and then they moved me to Westboro reception, where I had to wait at a bed for classification. So when you get committed to the state, that's like going to state prison versus like county. Like it's the next level. So they really threw the book at me for the litany of crimes that were listed. I mean, I had possession of a dangerous weapon, possession of a Class A substance with intent to distribute, possession of a gang bandana, all in school property. It's like they weren't happy. So I got committed.
Do you think you were dangerous?
That's a really good question. 100%. Yeah, I was definitely radiating danger. I think that there's a part of me that's always never liked violence. I've never liked any of that. I don't like fighting. I don't like keep getting emotional. I don't like hurting people. I don't like pain or anything. I mean, I became an alcoholic and addict because it's relief, right? I always call it a superpower because everything's loud and we just want it to quiet down a little bit, just quiet down. And then you need it physically. And so it becomes a whole thing. But I never intended to radiate danger. I was simply upset, confused, abused, and I was the scapegoat in my household. I was always the one who got the blame for everything. I was always grounded. I was always doing chores, forced to do chores. I was always forced labor. I would go to work. My father would put me to work without paying me. He started paying me with like pot and Percocets and shit like that at a young age too. Yeah, I think it was just a lot of like rage that didn't have an outlet. I didn't have a mom. I didn't have, and not only that, but there was no mom, and 5 boys. Like my grandfather had 5. So this is like a super masculine, super conservative household. Any emotion that I showed at all, any flamboyance or anything like that was like smothered and stomped out. And like I was dragged for even being upset. And I was called, Sally Sue and Wendy Weiner or anything like that. And then it would make me really upset that they would say that, and I would try to puff my chest out and be a tough guy like them. And so I took on that whole role full blown when I moved to Millbury. And maybe that angle about the community is so fascinating. I had never thought of that, but that makes a lot of sense. It really does.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so you had joined a gang, you had drugs on you, you had a knife. In the context of Columbine, people thought you were dangerous. Do you remember how you felt?
I felt like I deserved it. I always felt like I deserved it. Like I said, the scapegoat kind of dynamic. I feel like my father was incapable of integrity in a lot of ways. And because of that, he was frustrated and angry with himself and the way he was presenting himself and living. And so that was all piled on top of me. It was my weight to bear. And so when I get into custody, it was kind of like, this feels like the right path. This feels like the normal trajectory. And then when I got there, it's just like, John Wayne. My name's John Wayne. I'm a badass. Like, obviously, I just ran with that persona. And I was just telling somebody today, it's been over 7 years since I gotten into a fight, and I'm 39 years old. I would say I've gotten into a dozen fistfights just about every year my entire life until I got sober. Like I was always lashing out and aggressive and angry and trying to prove people wrong. And I always had something to prove. The way I felt was certainly like I had deserved it. And also this was right before 9/11. So when I got into custody, I went to the assessment first. So after the assessment, they sent me to Spectrum Juvenile Recovery Academy in Methuen, which when I got there, I was automatically comparing myself to the other participants who they were all like 17, 18. Some of them were like in their early 20s because you can get committed till you're 21. So I'm 13 years old and I'm with criminals who are 17, 18, 19. Like, and as I'm saying that, I just remembered in North Brookfield, the second time I was in North Brookfield, like there was some behavior issues and they put me in the special education class. Someone had the bright idea of taking a 12-year-old and putting him in a special education class with 16, 17, 18-year-olds that are using drugs and having sex and, and all the things, which I dove into immediately, like just immediately got into that. So then I get to this program and it was interesting. I thought to myself, these guys are clearly, they have issues. Like, I was so far removed from the idea that I had issues because I was always gassed up about being a Cormier and being like someone who's important. So I didn't really relate to my peers at all, kind of separated a lot.
How long were you in custody that first round?
The assessment was 3 months. The holding was about a month. And the program was, I think, 6 months. So it was, just under a year. They had 50% legal custody of me, and that'll come into play in a little bit. My caseworker was amazing. She was an awesome human being. Everybody who knew me, who had any status in the community, they saw potential that was like being smothered. It was just really interesting. She saw that. I know she did. People at school, the staff, the superintendent of Millbury High School vouched for me more than one occasion. Went to bat for me. The counselors there, like people were really trying to get me on the right path.
Does that happen to everybody? If they're put in custody when they're 13, they're 50% owned by the state, or was this just your particular situation and the charges that were brought against you?
When it comes to the law, well, there's chins. Chins is like you're acting out at home and your parents don't know what to do, so they bring you to the court. And then there's probation, where you actually commit a crime and they put you on a monitored probation status, where if you mess up, you're going to jail. Okay. And then there's DYS commitment, where it's like These guys are usually, murderers, moving weight. This is the upper class criminal, right? Upper class as in like higher crimes. And so, so when you're committed to the state, they have 50% legal custody of you until you're 18 years old. And oftentimes that can be extended until you're 21 to 24. And then 9/11 took place. That morning, I remember writing the date. We were in class 9/11, and the class was current events. And so I wrote 9/11, and I thought to myself, there hasn't really been any big current events lately. And as I had that thought, the door pops open, and in comes the TV on the thing, and he turns it on, and we're like, the towers are like on fire. It's like, okay, so that's like a trauma. I'll never forget that, because here I am in custody. I'm separated from my family. I'm at a program miles away, and I'm young, and we're looking like everybody's going to die. It looks like everybody's going to die. It looks like it felt like. So the panic was like real.
And you're also 12.
A child.
12, 13, yeah.
An actual child. They ended up sending us home. They sent basically everybody home because they didn't know what the hell was going on and whatever. But it took like a week or so. But then I ended up going home. And the ride home is when my father gave me a cigarette. That's when I got like the official permission when I could smoke butts and whatever. And because I was on DUIS commitment, I had like drug tests and whatnot. And I did pretty well with that for the most part. I think I failed for pot a few times. I wasn't really into like heavy drugs at the time. And then at 15, I got recommitted for pulling a gun out on somebody.
How did you get a gun?
It was actually a paintball gun. In the eyes of the law, when you pull a object that looks like a firearm on somebody, you just committed assault with a handgun. It doesn't matter if it's a real gun or a fake gun. So I was into paintballing. We used to do that. My dad did make an effort to try to get us into things. He liked to dress us up. He wanted us to look really good to the community, like on the outside, kind of deal. So I had a chrome pistol. It looked like a pistol. It looked like a big 45. I'll never forget this. I was a sophomore, and I had stayed back, and I had the hots for this woman, this girl who was like the president of the class. Like she was like an honor student, like the whole nine. Very beautiful. She invited me to the basketball game that night, and I was like, absolutely, could have been a dream come true. And I often go back to that night and think to myself, what if I just went with her instead? Because I got a phone call from one of my gang-affiliated buddies who said he had some beef, some older guys, and I needed to show up, like, bring that thing, And I was like, okay. So I abandoned the idea of going to the basketball game. There was a party somewhere in Millbury, and these guys were, like, in their mid-20s. We were, like, 15, and we show up, and I had the bandana over my face and the gun on my waistband, and it was dark. It was probably early spring. They come walking, pulling their sleeves up and getting ready to pound us into the ground. I mean, they're basically grown-ass men, and we're kids. And I pulled it out, and I pointed it at them. And I'll never forget that. I don't know what I was expecting for a reaction, but what I got for a reaction, it was exactly what you'd get if you point a gun at somebody. You know what I mean? Like, these guys went from pulling their arm sleeves up to pound me to the ground to seeing, a ghost. Like, they freaked out and turned around and tried to run, screaming. People were jumping over the fence, hiding behind trees, screaming, and they called the police. And I was like, yeah, like there was a lot of power. I felt power. It was wild. 10 out of 10 would not recommend. Please don't do that. So we left. I got rid of the gun, and I went back to my house, and I jumped on the computer. And 5 minutes later, like, the bullhorn came on. And they said, John Cormier, come out of the house with your hands up. The comical part about this story is the fact that my dad and I are both John Cormier. And he was like, are they here for you? And I was like, I have no idea. I was playing dumb, of course. I was like, I have no idea what this is about, Dad. I swear to God. They had the lights on the house. I mean, like, guns drawn. Like, they were not playing. So we both had walked out into the yard and had to lay down on the ground or whatever and get cuffed and searched and everything. And then they were telling me that my buddies already told on me, and I might as well tell them what exactly happened, because they know I just pulled a gun out on so-and-so at such and such a location and this and that. And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. Because in my head, I'm already a gangster. In my head, I already know you don't talk to the cops. You feed them nothing. You say nothing. You just deny. No gun, no case. You know what I mean? Like, the whole thing. So I denied it. They put me on a ankle monitor because they didn't have enough evidence to arrest me. And I went to court with my caseworker, who was like, so are you ready to surrender today? And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you're getting locked up. I was like, how can they lock me up? I was like, they don't have a case. Like, there's no gun. She's like, John, all 5 of the kids that you were with wrote statements. Everybody thought it was real.
You were the only one that knew it was a paint can.
Correct. These are supposed to be gang members, right? These are my boys, right? They're affiliated, right? And they just immediately told on me. So I was kind of heartbroken in a way. Like I felt betrayed. They told on me. I got recommitted, but I didn't have to do an assessment because they already did that. And they sent me to a boot camp, Spectrum boot camp. I really liked it. It was really good for me. It was active. You were moving around a lot. I got platoon leader like right away. The discipline, it was good for me. It was a 3-month boot camp and I got out. I went back to school.
So you went back to school, but at this point you've got a reputation, I'm sure.
Oh God. I had a reputation for sure. I tried out for the football team and I got onto the football team in 2003. I was supposed to be a sophomore. I was a freshman. I had stayed back because of the first arrest. And so I got into the football team. Now, this is pretty interesting because in 2003, the Millbury Woolies went undefeated. We went 12-0 and won the Super Bowl. I was a walk-on. I had never been with this team. So the fact that I got a spot on the team was a miracle. It's just a kickoff team, but it was amazing that I got to play. And we went 12-0 and undefeated. It was just a miraculous season. It was a lot of support from the community and the town. And like, you were somebody. That went to my head. And so the off season, I was working out like crazy. And I really took to the football thing. It kept me out of trouble is why I'm saying all this. And also I was betrayed by the gang members. So I even switched my appearance. Like my style changed.
Were you still doing drugs?
I was still partying, definitely. I wasn't interested in the idea of recovery. I thought it was ridiculous and occult and all that stuff back then.
So do you think the boot camp put you in that football trajectory?
Yeah, definitely. I think that helped a lot.
So then did you continue through senior year and graduate without any issues?
I wish that was the case. This is probably the most important part of my story. It is definitely the pivot. If I was on the edge, this is where I went off. So junior year, so there's 22 positions in football. We lost 17 positions because they all graduated. So we were predicted to be terrible. We were predicted to be one of the worst teams in the league, but we tied for the top spot. And so we went 8-3, which is a really good record. And I was benched. It hurt because I told everybody I was going to be a starter. And when I was working really hard that summer to get the starting position, there was one guy next to me. I couldn't shake him no matter how hard I pushed. He was going for the same spot. He turned out to be a police officer in Millbury. Kind of interesting polarity there. They ended up giving him the starting position. So I'm benched. First 3 games, I'm angry, upset, disappointed, ashamed, embarrassed, all this. So the 3rd game, coach comes up to me and he says, you're going in, Cormier. Put your helmet on, strap it up. I'm ready to go. Like, what's the deal? What do you need? He's like, you're going in for Charlie Waters. I was like, the nose tackle? Like, this is a really big person. and it's usually a big guy's position. I was like 140 pounds soaking wet. So I went in to play D tackle. Huge first play. I sacked the quarterback for like an 18-yard loss. It was a big to-do. They were chanting Rudy on the sidelines. Long story long, I ended up becoming captain of the football team. Despite the fact that I was a known cocaine user, I was a known party animal, I was a known womanizer, I was a 2-time convicted felon for some serious crimes. And at the end of my junior year, at the banquet, I'll never forget it. My parents weren't there, everybody else's family's there to support them, and no one's there for me, which is kind of normal. It was kind of common. Like I wasn't worried about that. And there's 4 captains. They picked 3 of them and they knew it was a toss up between me and guess who? The police officer. Right. People weren't really sure. And, there was people saying there's no way that Cormier is going to get it. He's not the right person for that position. And when they called my name, like the way that the whole place just erupted, just exploded into cheers. I mean, everybody was crying. It was so emotional. I worked so hard for it. And I got up there. They have you do like a little acceptance speech or whatever. And I was just like saying thank you to the team and, and this and that. Look forward to working into the senior year. It was a remarkable turnaround for someone who's gone to jail twice as a juvenile. At that moment, the door opened in the back of the hall and, it was kind of loud, like a loud kind of clutter. And the whole place like turned and looked and in came my father and my stepmother and they were clearly under the influence. And it was like, what's the peanut that's got the cloud around him? Pigpen. They looked like Pigpen. It was just like, I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed by their presence. And I didn't know he was coming. They didn't say that they were going to show up. Like he was trying to show me that he cared. Like it was like an effort on his part, but it was actually like it made things worse because the whole town saw like them in that shape. And so I got voted captain of the football team. Huge turnaround. I ran with it. I really tried to uplift the whole team in the school. So spring break 2004, my junior year, toward the end of my junior year, we're doing a pep rally. And about a week earlier, my father had burned our house down. At the time, we didn't know. It was just a house fire. But I had found out later by his own admission that this is what happened. And he got away with it and the insurance claim and whatever. yada, yada. So he ended up taking off to Canada with his wife.
So he burned your house down and then fled? Just left you?
And my sisters, they were already kind of forced out of the house. In our house, it was when you're 18, you're gone. You're out. I don't care where you're at. You're moving out. On your birthday, you're packing your shit and you're leaving. My parents wanted us out as soon as possible. It was fine by me. It was like, I wanted to get the hell out of there as soon as anyway, you know. So I'm displaced. I've got nowhere to live. I'm kind of staying here and there. But I'm captain of the football team, so I'm trying to hold it together. And I'm trying to inspire the entire school and faculty. I'm literally on the floor in the pep rally. When it was done, the principal walked up to me and said, John, I need to talk with you. And I was like, okay. So I followed her into the office. And in the office was 2 police officers, my caseworker, and a pair of cuffs and shackles. And she looked at me and she was crying. This woman wanted nothing to do with it. She's like, I have to take you into custody. I said, for what? She's like, John, the state has 50% custody of you. This was like 6 weeks before my 18th birthday when I was going to get off a DUI's commitment anyhow. But because they're legally obligated to make sure that I have a roof over my head and 3 hots and a cot, they came to the school to place me in custody. And so they brought me into custody. Now, devastating. Devastating is not even the word. Actually, I don't even know if I could ever articulate how that felt.
Yeah, you turned your life around. Yep.
I turned my life around. And just the panic, like it's still there. Like when I think about it, it still comes up. So I go back to the same cell. The same exact cell that I was in the last time I was there when I pulled a gun on someone and promised the world that I would never get in trouble again. I'm never going back to jail. I'm going to do the right thing. I didn't do anything wrong. But now I'm in custody. It was, again, the integrity, the displacement, the scapegoat. So I'm in custody. They served us dinner. It was an egg roll. I'll never eat an egg roll for the rest of my life. And I promise you I never will. That egg roll got me violently sick. Like bacteria infection in my stomach. In DUI's custody, things move slow. You know, and so like day 2, day 3, somewhere in there when I'm literally like, I can't even get off the bed. I'm malnourished and dehydrated. And so they brought me to the hospital, but they had to cuff me and shackle me up. Again, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't break the law, but they had to cuff and shackle me and escort me to the hospital. And I'm cuffed and shackled to the bed. And if I had to use the bathroom, I had to ask the officer to uncuff me. It's like, this is crazy. And they're looking for a place for me to stay. So they find one of my teammates whose his sister was dying of cancer, and they were really good friends of mine. And my buddy was like asking his dad, can we let John move in? And he's like, no. And the sister like vouched for me, rest her soul, Aaron. So the father agreed to let me move in. So I moved in to my buddy's house, and I had a chance. And I was like, thank God, like I'm good. So I was in custody for like a week or 2. This was during spring break, so it was perfect timing. But I get out and I go back to the school, and I had a girlfriend at the time who we were kind of toxic for each other, but she was like all I had left in my head, you know? And so I get to school, and there's this other girl crying in the office, and she's like, you didn't hear what happened? And I was like, no, like, what do you mean? And she's like, your girlfriend's been sleeping with my boyfriend all week. So after just having your house burned down and getting arrested for not doing anything wrong and like all these issues, I mean, I literally had no clothes. I had nothing. So I went to the nurses. The nurse will sign me out. I could just leave. This kid was there in the nurse's office. We got face to face. I was like, in my head, I was like, he's going to lie to me, and I'm going to just bury this kid right now. And I got in his face. I'm yelling at him. He's trying to calm me down. And I asked him outrightly, did you sleep with her? And I'm waiting for him to lie. The kid looked me like in the eye, and he said, yes, I did. And it blew me away. I was counting on him to lie so I could hit him, but he told me the truth. And I turned around because I didn't know what else to do. And I just walked into the hallway, and I was like tea kettle, like I was in rage mode, complete rage mode. And I started punching lockers. There's police officers at the school because of my behavior and my affiliates. And he tried to calm me down. I threw him off me like a rag doll. And then next thing I know, the entire Millbury Police Department tackles me to the ground. I'm fighting with them. It's 8 a.m. in the morning, right as the first bell for class is ring. And the entire school and faculty stood there while the Millbury Police Department picked me up, screaming like a wild banshee, throwing a complete temper tantrum. They picked me up off my feet, and they're holding me by my arms and legs while I'm flailing. And they carry me out in front of the school to an ambulance that was waiting, and I'm still fighting with them. And one of the sergeants who knew me and my family really well, because they were there all the time, he got in my face and he was like, Cormier, calm down. He's like, dude, we're not even arresting you. We're going to bring you to the hospital so you can try to get some help. So that was it. So I went to the hospital. I was cleared pretty quick. I was 18 at the time, so I was done with DYS. And there's a next part of that story that I don't even think is something we should share, but if you can believe it, it gets worse from there. And I'll just tell you that there was a 40-something-year-old man who allowed teenagers, high school kids, to party with him at his house. I had nowhere else to go. That place seemed like a viable option. You can imagine what might have happened, which became a requirement in order for me to stay there. I'm talking sexual things. That was first not consensual at all. The first experience was entirely unconsensual experience that I had tried to communicate to officials who thought it was funny because I was like a punk and a troublemaker. So word got out and people were teasing me, making fun of me and this and that. And I had compiled shame for giving this guy what he wanted. The amount of hatred for myself became through the roof, and I just took off. I traveled all over the place, and I was 18 years old. I went from 18 to 33 in a complete blackout oblivion.
From
like,
drugs and alcohol.
Drugs and alcohol as I could possibly consume.
Did you do multiple stints in county jail during that time, or
little things? I did 1 6-month bid for like cashing fake checks, which is like a whole. There's so many like micro stories that are fascinating. They're embedded in this whole thing, and I would love to take the time to go through all of them because it's really interesting. But yes, so a couple of little things here and there. Very unstable, bouncing all over the place, moving wherever I can, and just drug use to the point where I was completely homeless and separated from everybody who cared for me because. Well, I was separated from him anyhow, for the most part, but like I was just a liability.
So then at 33 is when you held up the convenience store. I know you've talked about that. You held up the clerk and she said, John Wayne, take that mask off. And then that's how you ended up getting arrested for that. And that's what brought you to opporTUNEity, right? So how long was your sentence?
I was very fortunate. So a masked armed robbery is a capital crime.
You had a real gun at that point?
It wasn't a weapon, it was a needle. But if you were a gang member or someone in jail, I was telling you that it was a gun. Trying to gas myself up to make it sound cool, but it wasn't cool. It was just a used needle. I saw it all the time on television. I figured they get away with it. I might be able to get away with it. In retrospect, it's like they didn't get away with it. That's why you saw it on television. You don't think when you're in that state. And honestly, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. There's no way I'd be alive if it wasn't for that, divine intervention? I don't know what else to call it. They gave me 2.5-year sentences ran concurrent. They botched the case, the detectives. If I fought it, I could have had the whole thing dismissed. But at that point, I was ready for surrender. I wasn't trying to fight anything. I was done. I just want to wrap it up. So let's just get it over with. And so that was the deal. They dropped it to a larceny from a person. Still a felony, not a mass armed robbery. So that helped marginally. Yeah, so then the story kind of circles back to what we were talking about earlier and how I found my way up to the classroom. And the other CEOs, they're like, oh, you guys got to go do your Christmas carols. Making fun of us. That changed, by the way. They don't act like that anymore.
Yeah, I've heard that there's been a change in the culture there, which is a good thing.
Big time.
opporTUNEity started in the fall of 2019, I believe. And you were part of the first group of musicians. So can we spend a little bit of time talking about how that was introduced to you and what that felt like for you?
I wanted to say, I think you guys played a major role in the culture change at that jail.
You mean the opporTUNEity program?
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that broke that barrier. I mean, it's literally in your mission statement, which gets me emotional because it did. It changed everything. It changed the way that jail operates. And the guys who are in STOP and in any of these programs now, they have a much better shot. And I really think that's connected to what you guys are doing. But in jail, when I'm reintroduced to music, there was a complete and utter oasis when I was in that class. So there was a stark contrast between jail, like your cell being on the unit, and class. Like you go to class and you're not even in jail. When we're there, like time flies. But in jail, time drags, like no matter what you're doing. So to have time fly for any length of time is awesome. You know, like you don't even feel like you're in custody. Then you get treated like a human. And it was a very fascinating experience all around. But as far as the music, like I was just happy to participate. There's so much I don't know about music. I was eager to learn like what I could. And so that kind of motivated me. But it was a life changer. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it did. And I've recalled you saying that it kept you out of trouble as well.
It's close. I actually got assaulted. I got physically assaulted 2 weeks before our graduation. One of my brothers, the gang, he saw me give a coffee to somebody else that I had bummed off to somebody else to give to somebody. It wasn't even my coffee. I bummed it off someone to give to somebody else. And he saw me give it to the other person. He thought I was like holding out on him. So he like was mad. And so we went to the cell to talk about it. He punched me not once, but twice in the face. He was a big dude. I looked at him and I shook my head. I was like, and I turned around and I walked away. I have never walked away from a fight. Not in my entire life. Not one time. I don't need an excuse to get violent historically. Like I would gladly try to prove who I was to you. Never mind hitting me. Like actually hitting me, well, not once, but twice. And it was like autopilot too. That's what was really weird. Like in retrospect, like I just turned around on my heel and walked right out. It was like there's no way I'm fighting you. Because if I had engaged, I was going to get pulled out, thrown in the hole, and taken out of that music program. And who the hell knows where I'd be right now? Like, it wouldn't be having this conversation with you. I wouldn't have my own apartment. Wouldn't have a career in recovery. That's for sure. 100% was the lever that I grabbed onto, the incentive lever. I want to go to class. I want to graduate. I want to sing. I want to be a part of this. I'm not entertaining that. And I was able to go to the graduation.
The spring rain is falling onto your grave. It's making me numb to all this pain. It's okay, they say, to feel so blue. Really hope to heaven welcomes you. Now we got an angel named Sabrina.
Well, the whole experience was just, it feels dreamy when I think back of that class. Like, it really does. It feels like a fever dream. Just the group that we had was very special. The songs that we wrote, like looking at the lyrics and stuff, it was just so amazing. Like, just there was so many things about that was just so inspiring and inviting and connection.
Do you have some songs that were written during that time that stand out as like some of your favorites?
Yeah, the Mountain High one was one that I really enjoyed. Josh had a major role in that. And if you remember, that's when we requested the bass guitar so that he could play the bass guitar. Josh was a participant in the program and also a gang member that I was affiliated with. And we got high together on the streets. I had saved his life one time with Narcan. We were really close. And when he got out, he succumbed to the disease of addiction not long after. So that was a major loss. But that group dynamic and the camaraderie and the staff, you guys are incredible. Like, working with Professor Dan and Professor Tom was awesome. They were like good cop, bad cop sometimes. And they broke me. I tried to rhyme everything. And they're like, just do object writing, John. Invoke the senses. And I was offended by that. How dare you tell me what to do? But those classes, the object writing, even just the basics of how to read music, that stuff stuck with me. It definitely helped my songwriting ability. I know that for sure, even though I feel like I've been in a writer's block lately. Maybe this will help.
Hopefully, right? Maybe can you just talk a little bit about how you're doing now? What's your life look like?
So I got out in 2020.
So 6 years, and you've been sober for how long?
Since January 11th, 2019. Okay. So it's been 7 years. The first 3 years, I was on this remarkable uphill. I was doing really, really well. I had a relationship, I think in the third or fourth year, and it was a beautiful relationship. I got a lot from it. For the most part, it was an amicable split, and I didn't handle that really well. I didn't handle that really well at all. Maybe attached to abandonment issues, or so I had resigned from the job, just feeling like that was what needed to happen to kind of separate and move on. And so I didn't take up another job. I had money in the bank. When we separated, 3 months, I wasn't doing anything. I was doing just music gigs, and my goal was to try to stick with that. It didn't catch fire. I needed to figure something out. But then I saw an ad for poker. I got into gambling pretty bad. And I'm still recovering from that. I'm still struggling with the gambling addiction. It's been very challenging for the last year, but otherwise, still sober. I'm all about the community work. I do volunteer work as much as I can. I work with people around the clock, both voluntarily and professionally. I do everything I can to promote different nonprofits and organizations that are trying to get people to pull their lives together, because I was a very hopeless and very dangerous, person at one point, and now it's not the case. I can regulate. For the most part, I can regulate. I got emotional 7 times during this conversation, but for different reasons. But I don't get angry like I used to. I'm not drug using. I'm not drinking anymore. I'm doing everything I can to support people. I'm going to take your advice and try to get back into music as much as I can. I've been hearing that a lot lately, so that's a reoccurring theme. It's something that I definitely need to lean into. But I really appreciate you reaching out and asking me to do this, and you've given me a lot of insight. I have a lot to unpack. Really appreciate that. The emotion is kind of a signature of that truth. I do have a network, very supportive network of sober alcoholics. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have survived the gambling issue. I know that for a fact. So I do have support. It's there. And I learned how to create community and connections, probably by opporTUNEity Music Connections. Relearned it.
That's a solid way to end, John.
April, why'd you take so long? Pick me up and take me home.
That was John Wayne Cormier. What I keep coming back to in this conversation is a through line, that John Wayne has thrived when he has had access to community and to affirmation, almost always through music, and he has fallen into his deepest trouble in the moments those have been cut off. Bullied as a kid in Canada, where, he said, the attitude started to develop. Back home in North Brookfield, briefly, a fifth-grade talent show where a studio executive told him he had something and a children's choir that was about to give him a place. Cut off by a move to Millbury at 12, where within months he had joined a gang and was on his way to his first arrest at 13. Built back through football in junior year, where teammates voted him captain in what looked like a real turnaround. Cut off when he was pulled out of school and recommitted at 17 through no fault of his own. And what followed was 15 years of homelessness and addiction. Built back finally and most durably inside the jail, where he walked into our music program and described it as walking into a room full of his people. This is the harder version of that observation. When healthy forms of community were not available to him, he found community anyway. The gang at 12 was an answer to the same need. The need does not go away. This is what opporTUNEity is at its essence. We are building community through music making. Music is one of the rare things that holds both pieces, the community and the affirmation, the belonging and the being seen, at the same time. That is why it can be deeply healing, and it is why, the moment John Wayne walked away from a fight in the jail cafeteria that he otherwise would have taken every other moment of his life, the explanation was simple. Staying in the music program mattered more than throwing the punch. And one more thing I should say out loud. John Wayne is one of the most naturally gifted musicians I have ever met. His songs are deeply poetic, organically musical, hooky, inspiring. Every one of them has the bones of a hit. After he was released, he came back into the jail as a teaching artist with opporTUNEity, an unprecedented step on the facility's part, and a source of real inspiration for the men with whom he worked. He has since made it his mission on the outside to help others struggling with addiction recover and heal. The community that was given to him is one he is now spending his life giving away. John Wayne, thank you for trusting me with your story. In each pulse, I take a piece from the conversation you just heard and turn it into something you can actually use in your work, whether you're teaching, running a program, or sitting on a board deciding what to fund. The piece from John Wayne's conversation I want to put in your hands today is this. People have two needs that show up together and have to be met together. Community, the feeling of belonging to a group of people who recognize you as one of their own, and affirmation, which is the specific experience of being seen and being told you have something. Music is one of the very few activities humans do that delivers both at the same time. That is why music programs can change people's lives when they work in ways that other programming often can't. But, and this is the part I want you to take into your week, most music programs accidentally optimize for one of these pillars and starve the other. If you run an ensemble program, a choir, a band, a hip-hop collective, a community drumline, you may be very good at building community. People show up, they belong. They wait for each other after rehearsal, they wear the merch, but ask yourself, if any given session, is each individual participant being specifically heard? Are they being named? Does someone in the room tell them, by name, with detail, what they did well, what they have, what they should keep doing? If the answer is no, you have community without affirmation. People will love being there, but the deeper change will not happen. If you run a private lesson or individual development program, you may be very good at affirmation. The teacher knows the student, sees the growth, gives meaningful feedback. But ask yourself, who else in this student's life knows what they are working on? Is there a peer group of other musicians who recognize them as one of their own? If the answer is no, you have affirmation without community. The student may develop real skill, but the deeper sense of belonging that holds people through hard moments will not be there. Here is a diagnostic I want to leave you with. 3 questions for your own program. 1. Does every participant in every lesson have a moment where someone names something specific about them? Not, good job today. The line you wrote in the second verse where you used the word cold was the moment the whole song turned. Keep doing that. That is affirmation. 2. Is your group structure actually producing community, or is it just co-presence? Co-presence is people in the same room. Community is people who will text each other when one of them doesn't show up. The difference is whether you've built rituals, opening circles, peer shout-outs, shared decisions that require participants to acknowledge each other by name. 3. Is there a public-facing moment? A performance, a recording, a release, a show? Where each individual's contribution is visible inside a collective product. The recording is the thing that lets a participant point at it and say to a parent, a partner, a probation officer, that's mine and that's ours. If you can say yes to all 3, you are building a program that does what John Wayne said our program did for him. It becomes a room full of his people, and it becomes more important than the fight in the cafeteria. That is not a personality outcome. That is a design outcome. If you're working through any of this in your own program and you want to think it out loud with someone, write to me. The whole point of this segment is the conversation it starts. That's The Pulse. See you next time. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. If this conversation resonated, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. It really helps others find the show. You can also send me your questions or coaching topics at opportunitymusic.org/intune, and I might feature them in a future episode. That's opportunity music.org/intune. Until next time, stay inspired, stay connected, and keep making music that brings people together.